Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining. Today we're here to talk about Jamf setup and reset and some specific use cases and workflows for education. My name is Sam Weiss, and I'm an Apple evangelist here at Jamf. I spent most of my Jamf career focusing strictly on education customers and workflows that will benefit your organization. And I'm really excited to have this conversation today. Jamf setup and reset were released to the public back in October at our 2018 Jamf Nation User Conference. And in the months between, I've had the chance to talk to customers and prospects just to hear a little bit about what your vision is for how you might use setup and reset. So I'm excited to share some of those ideas with you today, give you some practical examples that you could take back to your organization today to get even more use out of your Apple devices. Quick agenda preview. We're going to go through a Jamf introduction for those of you that are new to Jamf. And then we're really going to dive into Jamf setup and Jamf reset, talking about the philosophy behind why did we build these tools and how do we envision you using them in your organizations. I have 3 very specific education examples of how you might use these tools. And at the end, we're going to talk about how you can set up these tools in your environment, how to configure them, and what resources are available for you post-webinar. We'll wrap with some questions and answers. And if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. There's also a chat box that is not visible to us, so please put all your questions in the Q&A box within WebEx. I want to give a very special welcome today to those of you that are new to Jamf or exploring Jamf for the first time. Jamf is an Apple device management company trusted by tens of thousands of organizations to manage literally millions of Apple devices in schools, startups to Fortune 100 companies, and everything in between. And Jamf helps organizations succeed with Apple by empowering end users, giving IT flexible tools to make admins just as happy with their massive deployments as they are with their own personal Apple devices. We focus on the Apple platform exclusively to provide day zero support for new features and operating systems, and we offer technical support that is second to none. Jamf has several tools to address the needs of IT professionals, but today we're going to talk about Jamf Pro and Jamf Setup and Jamf Reset. Now, Jamf Pro is a powerful, flexible tool made for IT professionals that takes into account the entire Apple device lifecycle. At Jamf, when we think about device deployment, it's not just about apps and settings on devices. We think about the journey from pallets of devices in warehouses to productive devices in users' hands, and reducing as many steps in between as possible. Jamf's inventory-driven groupings allow incredible automation that integrates with services and systems that you already have in place. And Jamf Setup and Reset are 2 new tools Jamf released this last October that makes shared iOS device workflows accessible in more areas than ever before. We'll dive into both in just a bit, but Jamf Pro is on the left here. It's a web-based administrator console, and with the Jamf Cloud, it is accessible from anywhere, so you can manage your devices from anywhere. Jamf Setup and Reset are 2 iOS apps that, when deployed with Jamf, can provide a new shared device experience for your users. And before we explore those specific apps today, I wanted to provide a quick distinction between deployment models, and then be very clear about the different shared device deployment models available to Apple education customers. And one-to-one device deployments are exactly what they sound like. For each student, there is an iPad. And this may be a take-home program or simply devices that live in the classroom, but there is one for each user. And this makes the scoping of apps and content relatively easy. Shared devices, on the other hand, could be used by more than one person. And in a school, typically this is seen as a cart that is shared between classrooms. Maybe it's a resource that gets checked out from the library, or possibly just a few iPads that live in the classroom but are shared by all students. Depending on the use case, there can be additional layers of difficulty getting the correct apps and settings to the device. And today, we have several ways to solve this. First and foremost is Apple's shared iPad experience. This is an Apple School Manager exclusive feature that provides students a personalized device experience. So much like a family iMac or other computer at home, the student can log into his or her own personalized environment that's tied to a managed Apple ID. And because students get 200 gigabytes of iCloud storage, it's easy to sync documents and settings, photo libraries, to whatever device that student picks up. If you haven't seen it, please talk to your Apple or Jamf rep because it's truly an amazing experience. There are some hardware requirements and network suggestions to consider, and you do need to be using managed Apple IDs, all things that Jamf and Apple can help you out with. If you'd like to learn more about Apple Shared iPad, the link at the bottom is a webinar that I did 2 years ago. That's really a 40-minute deep dive into Apple Shared iPad. And while Apple has a really great vision for personalized shared iPad, at Jamf we realized that there were other use cases where current shared use device workflows were not ideal. So to make things better, we first had to narrow in on the problem we were trying to solve. And while every one of your deployments is unique and different, when you strip away almost everything, you're left with a few pretty simple concepts. First of all, devices need to be set up. And per Jamf fashion, we think this should be accomplished by empowering the end user as much as possible. And after setup, the device is used for some period of time. This could be 4 years of middle school, or it could be 4 hours on a high-stakes exam. It could be an entire semester, or maybe the physics teacher just needs them for 1 or 2 lessons. And after being used, these devices get reset, and the cycle continues. And while Jamf has done this for one-to-one deployments for many years, shared devices are drastically different, and to provide the fantastic end-user experience that we want, we had to provide admins with some new tools. And just to give you some insight into our thought process, at Jamf, when we think about a shared device, this may not be the user's primary device, or they may not have a primary device within that organization. This is generally an iOS device with a task or with a role. Think about a device that is provided to you to help you accomplish a task. Now, these types of deployments are temporary and they have a very high turnover. And this single iPad could be used by a dozen people on exactly the same day. We're also thinking specifically about scenarios where Apple Shared iPad is not a good fit. Maybe these are faculty members or substitute teachers without managed Apple IDs. They could be parents or PTA members. Maybe your iPads just don't support Shared iPad. And when thinking about this problem from the start and end, we knew we had to create a tool in a workflow that was simple enough for all users, and it had to be flexible enough for all use cases. And thinking holistically about this workflow, to make the users comfortable with the entire process, we had to provide easy-to-use device wiping tools that reassured the end users that their data would be securely removed from the device in a way to return to square one to let the process happen all over again. So we created Jamf Setup and Reset. These two tools help quickly provision a device to provide a customized user experience. Unlike Apple Shared iPad, this is not tied to any particular identity. If you want to be nuanced about it, this is an anonymous, customized provisioning workflow where the user is in the driver's seat. Through easy dialogues and clear messaging, the user can provision, use, and securely wipe their own device, all without IT involvement. And Jamf Setup and Reset are really like peanut butter and jelly. They're good on their own, but extremely powerful when they're used together. And in the examples I'll give later on, you'll see cases where we use both, or maybe we just use one. But most important, just remember green means go, or set up my device, and red means stop. I'm done, wipe this device, and bring it back to square one. So with Jamf Setup, the user is presented a very simple pick list. They make a selection, and the device is automatically provisioned per IT specifications completely over the air. This app can be run as many times as necessary or hidden if you want to force a user to use Jamf Reset to purge any potential user information. And my favorite thing about all of these apps is it's completely brandable through app config. That means you can make this app have a look or feel that is your own with customized logos, colors, and text. We'll talk about that in much more detail later on. Jamf Reset does exactly what it sounds like. It enables a simplified reset workflow. It's 3 simple taps with customizable messaging, and this will allow you to reassure your users that their information is safely destroyed with just a few taps. And this type of wipe is a true MDM wipe, which, without getting too technical, is advantageous to an admin versus a wipe directly from the device itself. And as Mac sysadmins, I think we all know that on an iOS device, there is a menu within settings that can do a device wipe. But from a user perspective, it's 6 or more taps within menus and lots of scrolling and confirmation pop-ups. If you truly want to bring shared iPad to the masses, there needs to be a simple method to digitally sanitize a device with clear user messaging, and that's what we have with Jamf Reset. Now, there are just a ton of great use cases for this that we've already seen from some of our customers. For carts of iPads that live with media specialists or instructional technologists, it's a great, safe way to empower a workflow that brings choice to any user group. We've heard stories about iOS devices being used in university student centers for new student orientation. If you have general purpose devices or you struggle to offer a customized and up-to-date experience for extracurricular groups like robotics and coding without breaking the budget by buying every group their own set of iPads, Jamf Setup and Reset will be extremely valuable to you. And lastly, some districts offer white glove provisioning of their iOS devices so they come preset with apps and settings, and even there, Jamf Setup can simplify things. Today, we're going to look at examples of all of these use cases. And as I go through them, pay attention to the user interface of the apps because they will all be different, from the colors to the texts. Everything about these apps can be customized. So our first example today is going to be about an iPad cart that functions as a resource that a teacher, a department, or extracurricular group could check out for some period of time. Some unique things about this deployment is it's going to be temporary and mobile, so it could roll around. It's not something that stays in a class all year. It's used by a class or group for an activity or lesson and then brought back to square one. Our media specialist or instructional technologist is responsible for this resource. And most importantly, and this is something that we've struggled with, device data needs to be wiped from the device because we want users to feel comfortable. So we're thinking about Safari history, camera roll, local stored iWorks documents, etc. We need to be able to purge those, but bring the device back to that usable state. So what you're going to see in just a second is an example of Jamf Setup and Reset in this exact scenario. It's going to go through in real time. This video is not sped up or anything. And on the left side, we'll just see some checkboxes as we hit some milestones. So here we go. We are working in this instance with a freshly enrolled device. And as soon as the media specialist or instructional technologist opens the iPad, we really only have 2 apps, Jamf Setup and Reset. And you may have saw settings there. As soon as we launch Jamf Setup, what we'll see is a very clear window that says, what type of configuration would you like this device to have? And as you saw in there, we've got language arts carts, science carts, robotics club, after-school programs, summer classes. All we have to do is hit select. And in just a moment, the iPad will automatically configure itself to be a language arts cart. So what we're seeing is we have a unique background and we have apps that are specific to English or language arts. I apologize. If we want to choose a different configuration or we've made a mistake, we can relaunch Jamf Setup, tap Science Cart, click Submit. And again, in just a moment, we are going to have that customized device experience. So the background is labeled Science Cart, and all of the apps on the device that are shown are used for science. And at the end of this device's life cycle, temporary life cycle, we can very easily open Jamf Reset, hit the big red button, and we can be confident that the device will wipe itself. We'll go through the setup assistant, and then we will be back at square one, where we could choose what type of device would we like this to be. So that was the first one. Really fun. I think super applicable to many schools that have carts or checkout devices. But now, just to give another example, let's talk about higher ed. So in a university student center, the scenario that we're going into this one with is we have new student orientation. And for new student orientation, we have decided to provide users an iPad. So the user, whoever that is given an iPad upon reception. And depending on who they are, we'll give some examples in a second, different content and settings will appear on the device. It may make sense to keep some stock apps for certain workflows, but roles with private information that have been entered on the device are going to require a wipe. So just to show this off again, on the right side, we'll see our iPad, and the left side, some milestones as we hit them. So again, we're working with a freshly enrolled device. After unlocking it for the first time, we're going to open Jamf Setup. And in this, we could be a student that's on a tour of the university. We could be a parent or guardian of a student on a tour. And we also have admissions, housing, and finance as different types of configurations that this iPad could be. So we've selected Student Tour, and when we hit the home button, what we'll see is a bunch of apps, a bunch of web clips that are very specifically geared towards a student on a walking tour of a campus. We've also kept some stock apps, so the ability to take notes, pictures, and maybe use the Measure app to see if your mini fridge will fit in the dorm. Now, if we want to go back and change this to be the parent or guardian of a student that's on a campus tour, we can do that, and they will have, again, a very different experience. So here we see we have a background that's really geared towards a parent or guardian. We've got move-in dates, student housing, and student loans are really the things that this guardian is interested in. But here's where things get really cool. If we were to say that we want this to be an iPad for finance, as soon as we hit submit, something different's going to happen. You'll notice that Jamf Setup went away, and all that we have left is Jamf Reset. So the idea behind this is if a student is entering private information or anything that could be cached in Safari, we want to make sure that Jamf Setup is not an option, and Jamf Reset is the only next step workflow to be able to bring this device back to square one. Excellent. Now, this third one is a little different. It's not my favorite workflow, but it is something that many schools are still doing. Some schools opt to provide a white glove deployment. And what I mean by that is there are times when students will not be doing all of the tapping and the setting up. And that's okay. Different deployments serve different needs. However, Jamf Setup can still help. So typically what I see with this is central IT will have a warehouse or a central location where devices and iPads are delivered. And after that, devices are transferred to schools. This could be done on an on-demand or an as-needed basis. But what we've built with Jamf Setup in this instance is a quick process to go from the setup assistant all the way through Jamf Setup. So by the time we're done, the device is activated, it's organized within our Jamf Pro server, and it's ready for delivery. Now, this one, I'm going to do a little bit different. All of the other examples I showed you post-enrollment. I want to show you what this looks like for a fresh, out-of-the-box iPad or a recently wiped iPad. And we're going to go through automated enrollment, previously known as the device enrollment program, but that is the number one most recommended method of device enrollment for any deployment, but also including Jamf setup and reset. So here's what that looks like. This is the only video that I've sped up because I didn't want to show my Wi-Fi password, and we've all seen this probably a few times. So this is a freshly wiped device. As soon as it gets on the internet, it's automatically going to configure over the air. Now that the device is enrolled, we're going to see the background change to indicate that this is the central IT office configuration. And super simple text. Tap the green app to assign this iPad to a site. We get our list of sites. We tap submit, and the device will automatically provision itself to whatever Franklin Middle School's configuration was. So we'll see the background change, and we also have a web clip specific to Franklin Middle. Now, as I said, I think many of us are moving towards zero IT touch configurations where we really do want the end users driving the entire experience. But this is just one cool tool and one cool application of the tool that doesn't necessarily support zero IT touch configuration, but it does save you a lot of taps. In other MDMs, you'll be provided what's called an enrollment user. And at the DEP, or automated enrollment authentication step, you could type that in. This is a dramatic reduction in the number of taps to achieve the same result. So hopefully, as you've seen, the possibilities are really endless. We've built this as a flexible, customizable framework, and we're really excited to hear how you plan on using Jamf Setup and Reset in your environments. So now that I've shown you some examples of how it could be used, I want to talk about how to get it set up and what is the technology that really drives this experience. Sorry, getting a drink of water and I swallowed an ice cube. Anyway, there's really three pieces of technology that make all of this possible. One is managed app config. This is honestly my favorite part. This is how we help define the look, feel, and behavior of Jamf Setup and Reset. These apps also, what these apps are really doing on the back end is they're applying something called an extension attribute to the device. And today that's a string that is equal to the role or title selected in the setup app. And lastly, we have smart groups. And these are dynamic lists of devices that are populated based on some piece of inventory. And today, that piece of inventory is that extension attribute on the device. And we can use these smart groups to scope apps and configuration profiles to devices. So starting off with managed app config. Managed app config is awesome. I'm going to do another webinar in the future about how awesome it truly is, but what you need to know today is Jamf can push a small XML file down to a device that contains the settings or configurations for an app. And you can see it on the screen. It looks like just a bunch of keys and strings, but for Jamf Setup and Reset, they power the look, feel, and function of the app. The two iPhones that you see on the screen are running the same exact App Store version of Jamf Setup, but they look different. They have different options, different logos, different colors, different text. And that's because they all have different app configurations. Now, I'm going to breeze through this part, but I highly encourage you to read the Jamf Setup Reset documentation for a deeper understanding. This first part of the app config is all about helping the app talk back to your Jamf Pro server. As part of the setup, you will create an API user within Jamf that is used specifically for Jamf Setup and Reset. And you populate that information here just so that the app can function. As we scroll down, this next area is where you will define your extension attribute that you have already set up in Jamf, as well as the array of values. And as you can see, we've got string, role1, end string, string, role2, end string. If you look at the device on the right, that's what you see in the array. You can have virtually as many of these configurations as you would like, with the understanding that it is a scrolling list and at some point that's going to become very long. Moving right on down, this green area defines the logo on the right. And this needs to be a publicly accessible image file. This orange section is both the header as well as the large text below the icon. And this yellow section is the text immediately below that. Moving on, towards the end here, these three sections all pertain to color. So the first text value is all about the text color throughout the app entirely. The next one is the button color. After that is the text on the button, the color that defines that. And then the last one is the background color. So as I was going through those examples, you saw that the app matched the branding of the organization. This is how we're able to do that. Right here, this is the text that's on the selection button. And the green area on the bottom all pertains to that success window. So what would you like the text to be on the next one as well? So managed app configurations get put in the app configuration tab on the mobile device app catalog. Now you may have gone there once before to set up self-service, if I was to really take you back, but you may not have used this often since. This is a really great use case of using app config to its fullest extent. And as I mentioned before, extension attributes are those flags that you can put on a device. You do need to set up the extension attribute ahead of time, which you do from the settings and device management menu. I have chosen to call mine Jamf Setup Choice. And this is also reflected on the inventory record of a device. This one is where it's Franklin Middle. Now I can either fill that data in manually with Jamf Pro, or I can use the Jamf Setup app to change that value. And to pull all of this together and to make it actionable, you create a smart group that uses these device flags as criteria to either be included or excluded from this smart group. And lastly, you can use smart groups as scoping criteria for apps or settings. So now that we've gone through all of it, hopefully you understand what's going on under the surface. The Jamf Setup iOS app sets an extension attribute on the device's record. A smart group is looking for this extension attribute, and once it sees it, that device will fall into or out of scope for any scopable item within Jamf, whether that's an app, a background image, a configuration profile, a web clip, really anything else that is scopable. So for resources to take you beyond this webinar, listed, you will see the K-Base articles for both Jamf Setup as well as Jamf Reset. The video that I'm linking to on the bottom was our Jamf is Building Stuff session at the Jamf Nation User Conference this last year. That's where our product team really did a deep dive on setup use cases as well as best practices for Jamf Setup and Reset. So I definitely encourage you to give that video a watch. So at the end of the day, Jamf Setup and Reset put easy shared device workflows into end users' hands in a safe way. Customized experiences make devices more valuable and more flexible for your deployments. And we're truly excited to see what our customers do with Jamf Setup and Reset, and we encourage you to share them on Jamf Nation. So with that being said, thank you so much. Certainly appreciate everyone's time today, and feel free to connect with me on Twitter. I'm Jamf_Sam, and again, love to hear how you're getting more use out of your Apple devices with Jamf Setup and Reset, and look forward to hearing from you all in the future.